Hey,
What's up?
what's going on, Cameron?
Chilling, chilling.
Good, good, good. Glad to
Good to see
finally.
you.
I don't think we've ever actually had the pleasure of meeting in person, but
I don't
but
think
your
so.
but your legend is already extended to me, and I'm already a fan. So you
I
know,
appreciate that. I appreciate that. Same here. I have been doing this for a little while now, and it's been cool just to kind of talk to people that I know or know through other people and kind of get backstory. And at the same time, we talk about different things that are going on at the present and stuff like that.
yes,
So it just makes for a good conversation, especially artist to artist, creative to creative. So um, I've been, you know, binging on you. So I have I have a series of questions. You know what I mean?
uh, well, I'm
So we'll
ready to
just
answer anything you got for me.
okay. Let's get into it then. So let's talk about growing up as a Ghanaian American,
Yeah,
especially in a city like a DC, because I consider DC a very cultural
hmm
city, a lot of different nationalities, very diverse. Did you ever experience any sense of like duality when it comes to nationality in DC, or does that
um,
play a role?
I'm sorry, let me adjust a little bit.
That's okay.
It's interesting you'd ask me that question. For me, I had a unique situation that, I was born and raised partly in DC, but I also spent some of my childhood growing up in Germany for 4 years. And so, I wasn't your average black girl, like I also in a city that historically has color cast, like DC, where some people still kind of talk about what plantation their ancestor got raped on with pride. Being a brown skinned woman was a very specific experience for me, and being a brown skinned child was even more of a specific experience. Um, to say that, it didn't mean that I did not enjoy what was surrounding me. DC is one of those few places where you can turn on the television and there are black people singing classical music and making jazz, and you are surrounded by culture. Like, you're surrounded by culture, discerning listeners from, the uttermost to the guttermost know great music. And great music is not a luxury, but like our right. So you go to the park and there are free concerts. And Stevie Wonder used to give a free concert in DC. It's the home of Bohemian Caverns, where Roberta Flack cut her teeth right across the street from Howard University. So you can't help but like get into that energy. But to talk about that time, I can't erase the time I spent in Germany listening to George Michael and Culture Club and falling in love with Cyndi Lauper. And I believe that that time, watching Sweet 16, I'm dating myself, but like, that particular time in the 80s, with films and music were just very, very essential to creating the YahZarah that people see before them. And of course, yes, being a Ghanaian American, um, my parents, my stepfather was in the Black Liberation Army. My mother met my father, my biological father, on a pilgrimage to Africa to start her own business and came back with a stowaway called me.
Wow.
So, living in an African or culturally minded, it's always been nation time in my house,
Yeah.
and in my heart, and with my own son, I just took my son to Ghana, took it his naming ceremony. So, now he's got his Ghanaian name. He's Kofi Oduro Kwarten. I'm YahZarah Oduro Kwarten, or Yajon Koma Oduro Kwarten. But I
Wow.
was raised Dana Williams in the city of Washington, D.C. And go-go, classical music, jazz, hip-hop, and pop made me who I am.
Wow. I
Yeah.
think it's so interesting that the experience of Germany. I remember when I first heard Terrence Trent D'Arby, and I got like obsessed with Terrence Trent D'Arby. I ended up
Mm-hmm.
finding this performance of his on DVD, rummaging through some like vintage stuff, and it was him in Germany doing some show in
Mm-hmm.
Germany. And I always just felt like, man, Germany is cool. So I know that experience like opened you up way more, like obviously DC is diverse, but it was called,
Absolutely.
is it still called Chocolate City? Or
Formerly
is
known
that,
as the Chocolate City, but the energy never leaves. The
yeah,
energy will never leave, because DC is also one of those places where you got old black money. So as long as that exists, you can't fully gentrify DC. And
I
and,
hear
and
you.
also middle class families who believe in passing on, real estate to their kids. So the house I grew up in at the age of 2, with the tree I watched grow in front of me, is still standing in front of my mother's house. She still has her house in DC. You know, our community and our neighborhood is still very diverse. I went to Tacoma Park Elementary School. If there's anybody out there from DC, Keene Elementary School, Alice Dill Junior High School, and I graduated from Duke Ellington School of the Arts. You'll never be able to pull the chocolate out of the city, even though you don't see as many of us.
That's what's up.
You know, it's generational. That flight always happens. White flight in, black flight out, black flight in, white flight out. We gonna see it turn around. Look at New York.
Yeah.
Right now we got people unfortunately leaving in droves, and then that'll turn around again. The art and the flavor will return. You know, it just is what it is. But you know, with Germany, you know, I was the only 6-year-old at the Burning Spear concert because my stepfather was a DJ as well, and he would love to he taught me how to put the needle on the record when I was 5 years old. So, you know, going to these concerts, we would go to Holland and he would go to Amsterdam to, you know, imbibe and release as a man who's in the army and needed to have places to decompress. Yeah. And I would get to go to amazing concerts every summer in Germany.
Wow.
Every summer. And I also took Russian ballet. A lot of people don't know I danced for 14 years as a result of my time in Germany. So.
Wow. That's what's up. Well, let's talk about Duke Ellington School of the Arts, because as you mentioned, like, it's just, I mean, I've met a couple people who've attended that high school, that performing arts high school, and they are phenomenal.
We're a gang.
Yeah. Yes, you are. You learn after a while. You're like, oh yeah, you went there. It's like Duke Ellington School of the Arts, HSPBA, like all these different places where that are
the Dallas School of the Arts.
Yeah,
we got to have gang signs and like crip walks, like because generations. You know, I'm not just friends with people I graduated with, but like I have mentors and friends who go as far back as 1973, the first graduating class, and who I am is part and parcel because of Duke Ellington School of the Arts. It literally saved my life because I was searching for my identity as a dark-skinned young black female who lived in Germany, who came back to a city during the crack era, but you know, speaking German and having nobody to talk to, having to learn how to put my dukes up, and discovering that when I sung, people wouldn't beat my ass. So, you know, the day I showed up at Duke Ellington, because I felt like I was finally in this place where I didn't have to windmill, and I was with my people. I knew I was with my people because I cut school for an entire year just to hang out there, and ended up being the star in a musical called Melindy that was written by a student. Wow. And, you know, my friends at Alice Dill would always say, we know you don't belong here. And so they would, like, you know, do these elaborate plans to help me get out of the school building so I could go to Duke Ellington, where I really felt like I belonged. And so when I was finally a student, I went to school. I got there at 6:30 in the morning. I'll never forget. It was still like dark outside because I didn't want to miss a second on my first day at school with my tribe. And I stood on the front steps of the school because I was also a bullied kid, and I cried. I cried for about an hour. I cried until I saw other kids starting to come, and I didn't want anybody to see me crying. And I tell that story because, you know, anybody watching who still is dealing with the trauma of being bullied, it gets better. Finding your path inside of yourself and your tribe helps you to assume that role. And art is a gateway, which is why we have to protect it for children, you know, because it saved me from depression. It saved me from suicide. It saved me from gang violence. Everybody in my hood would be like, she goes to Duke Ellington and she can't be out here hanging out with us. And I wanted to act like I was hard. So I was in a little gang, 4900 crew, Fort Totten Drive. What's up, y'all? And I would go, you know, I would call myself being involved in these like gang fights. I would watch everybody windmill. I'd be the last to go, you know, do my thing and then run home like nothing happened. And eventually, once I started to really do things with my life, my friends were like, you can't go where you're going and hang out with us. You know, and I attribute Duke Ellington's reputation to that story, because no matter where I went in the city, southeast, northwest, you know, wherever, when I said I went to Duke Ellington, the community protected me. Even it was protecting me from myself. Yeah, it's magical. I owe them everything. Mm-hmm.
So talk about the transition from Duke Ellington to North Carolina Central. I would love to hear about your HSB,
HBCU
HBCU
experience.
experience. I went to Morehouse. I'm tripping. I'm
No, you good. You good.
Yeah, so but I would love to know because I've met a couple of really phenomenal people who've gone to Central. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. So I would love to know about your experience there as well as your creative path as it relates to how that progressed while you were at Central.
Yeah, and that's an interesting story. You know, everything about my life is extremely serendipitous. I wasn't supposed to be born. My mom was told she'd never have children. You know, she was dying of malaria when she got pregnant with me. Years later, I ended up going to Duke Ellington. I'm going through a really tough um, stint in my life because I had to leave an ensemble that I really loved because I decided to wear my hair out natural. And my mom pulled me out of this ensemble because I was being harassed for deciding to do this, and I had lost my outlet because I'd been in this ensemble since I came to the school and I had nobody to relate to because I made a decision to stand on my blackness and on what I wanted to be me in a setting with my own people. And so I joined this choir, the all school choir, and it was the director named Terrence Lee Jones, and he went to Howard University, and a group of students that he worked with came looking for a girl to be in a group with them. And I'm telling you this because the backstory will illuminate my NCCU story. So I ended up in a group with Eugene Young from Dallas, Texas. He was going to Howard. Daryl Hunt, Dawu, a brother named Lawrence Samuel, and a young, amazing sister named Kia Bennett from Richmond. They were all going to Central. I replaced Cy Smith in the group. So I wrote some of my first songs with this group. We were called In Time. Yes, NCCU, go Eagles. Yes, I'm gonna saw somebody. And so, long story short, I used the remainder of my senior year. I work with them. I write my first songs. They mentor me. They're my brothers and my sister. I ended up going to Central with a band that I ended up being in while I was at Central. And it saved my life. I was singing and performing in clubs like Tacoma Station and, all over the city. And I was like 16 years old. And so I got accepted to Carnegie Mellon. I could have gone to Juilliard. I got accepted to Berkeley. But I didn't want to study classical music. And something about the South was enchanting to me. And the entire band got full scholarships to North Carolina Central University's Department of Jazz. And I felt like that was a sign for me to be there with my friends. And I was in love with the bass player, so it didn't hurt. And so we all went to North Carolina Central together to go to school. And I ended up in a music industry class with a gentleman named Chip Shearing, who would later become my producer. And he and I put out my record, Hear Me, together.
Wow.
Yeah. So my freshman year, I fell in love with the first boy I met on campus, smoked weed, and didn't do nothing but roll out with a .8 GPA. I have to be honest about my time there. During that summer, I was embarrassed, but I was also clearly not gelling with gelling with the college experience, or at least I thought. I did end up getting my scholarship back, making Dean's List, but I had did it with an added challenge because that summer I ended up auditioning to sing background for Erykah Badu because of Eugene Young, who was singing background at the time, and she wanted him to be the MD, but she had to test him, see what his ear was like. And so he hit me up during the summer, and he said, Erykah wants somebody from Dallas, but I want somebody I know who's going to hold it down. And I was going to call Cy, but she was with Whitney Houston at the time, and he was like, so I called you first. And so I had no money to get to Dallas, but I had to get to Dallas so that I could pretend I was from Dallas. So my mom emptied out her bank account. She poured out jars, and we poured out jars of money, and I ended up getting on a Value Jet flight. To tell you how long ago that was, a Value Jet flight, and flying to Dallas, Texas, where I learned 17 songs in 3 days and ended up touring with her on the Lilith Fair and ended up being out on the road with her for 7 years after that. Arranging on Mama's Gun for 4 songs, all while going to North Carolina Central University. And I was working on my Hear Me record at the same time, she was working on Mama's Gun. So everything I was learning, you know, from jazz composition and singing in choral, you know, settings and being in the ensembles, I was bringing to the arrangements I was using at the time. And, you know, all my whistle tone stuff that I was doing at the time. And so for me, Erykah Badu was also she confirmed for me that I was okay. You know, she was a performing arts kid. She minored in theater and dance, and I was a performing arts kid that majored in voice and minored in dance and theater. So when I got there with her, it was just kismet for me. You know, like I auditioned for her and she sung background for me while I sung Gap Band's You Are My High. You know, it was just an opportunity for me to sit at the feet of somebody whose very existence made me feel safe. And if I hadn't gone to Ellington, I wouldn't have met Eugene and Daryl. You know, that all snowballs into me going to Central, Central supporting my choice mostly to sing background for Erykah while attending the school. It did eventually get rough because not all artists become artists. Some of them become teachers, and some of them are haters. So I ended up having to leave before my time, but I still go back. I still work with students. You know, I'm all over the literature to get kids to go. You know, hopefully they'll give me my honorary doctorate. And, you know, but Central is where it all happened. I sung at open mics there. All the people who came to my open mics supported my first record, Hear Me, that Chip and I produced. And my first single was a song called Black Star. And my second was a song called Rooftop that I wrote with Fonte Coleman from Little Brother.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Listen here.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we got into your time with Erykah, which, like, for me, Mama's Gun is one of my favorite albums of all time.
Mine too. Mine too. And
it's a no skip album. It takes you, it pushes you, it pulls you, it ebbs and flows. It's dynamic and everything like that.
It's a love letter.
Only imagine. Yeah,
I've always believed it to be a love letter to us. You know, Times of Wasting, I wasn't in on that session, but it ministered to me. There were so many things. And, you know, being in those sessions, being in the session that produced Orange Moon, you know, being there in that love that produced that record. Camp Wisdom was its own entity, and it was a nucleus around Badu that I think was the catalyst for making that record what it was, you know, because all of those Eugene Young, Gino on drums, Braylon Lacey on bass, R.C. Williams on keys, Sean, why am I forgetting Sean's last name? Sean, who's responsible for a great deal of oh my gosh, why am I forgetting Kirk Franklin's production? I mean, just so much talent in one room. And Don B. Gilbert, China Black, you know.
Yeah, y'all were, what?
We were one voice. Sean Martin, thank you, Daryl. Sean Martin on keys, you know, and we were young. So there's nothing there was nothing diluting the purpose of making this record. It was Erykah's sophomore album, so she didn't have shit to lose, but also felt like that she had something to prove. But at the same time, we're still having fun.
Yeah.
You know, it was just fun. And I was going to record those records and then flying from Electric Lady back to North Carolina Central and recording my album at the same time and living, you know, like I wrote Rooftop in my dorm room with my very patient Trini roommate, you know, smoking blunts and writing, you know, to a karaoke cassette. And that's how I record my songs. And it, you know, and then I would, because all of this creativity was just swirling around us at the time. There was just so much that came from that for all of us individually. You know, Indombi's tuning up and co-signing, Little Lost Girls Blues. China put out an EP at that time. Everybody was just churning out this like assembly line of just excellence. We would have these listening parties where we would just listen to everything and everybody. Gino Young turned me on to Fiona Apple.
Wow.
Became the voice of my, you know, teenage angst, who inspires me to this day musically.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you were in the process of recording Hear Me, Was there ever a conscious decision about genre, or it was just all feel like?
I just did what I wanted to. I just had fun. And I think Chip, who had submitted some songs for Who Is Jill Scott, also had a mild vendetta and wanted it to be a specific thing. Um, but I'm not mad about that. You know, at the time I was singing background for Erica, so it was actually expected of me to give the album that I gave. You know, and I did that. You know, even though I was extremely moved by Tina Turner, James Brown, uh, Joan Armatrading, and these are names that, you know, people that my mom played in my household. The Beatles, um, the Who. You know, I was listening to all this music, but I still wasn't able to put that amalgamation of sound and to hear me. The closest I got to it was Baby Love. Um,
Okay.
but I loved every song I ever wrote. You know, I Love Is You was a freestyle that I wrote for Fonte Coleman, who I was dating at the time in college. You know,
Wow.
I wrote it in our kitchen. You know, so like was um, my life was literally, it was like an open diary, and I would have this sketchbook that I would write lyrics in, and on the other side I would draw pictures of whatever was happening at the time. And so I would walk into the studio and Chip would be like, hey, open your book, I got something for you today. And
Wow.
either what was in that book would become the song, and it would always be something that was happening in my life at the time, or something I had seen or experienced, or I would freestyle the songs. You know, put the record on, let the needle hit, and let the music play, cause it's my day. That was Chip's idea. Chip was like, didn't you just learn Freedom Jazz Dance? I just learned that in school, like previously. So he was like, think about that, because I was kind of stumped on the melody, but I had other lyrics,
Yeah.
and so there was just the purity of sound and his attention to excellence that made me a better writer, that made me a great producer. Him pulling in my fellow students who are friends of mine, like Darian Brockington, who I met in the financial aid line my first day of college at Central, who was my brother and one of my collaborators. Pulling in Fonte, you know, our little puppy love blossomed over making music. You know,
Right.
he would come to my dorm room and I would play records for him, and we would go to record stores, we could play the records, and he introduced me to Bootsy Collins, you
Wow.
know, and I would introduce him to Kim Burrell. You know, so all of these things would happen. All of us would go to Midnight Madness sales together and then go back and write music. You know, I remember when Ninth Wonder was like trying records on folks and being like, hey, how y'all like this? And we'd be sitting around on Chicken Day, which was a very special day in North Carolina Central, where you get dressed up and you go eat chicken, and there might be a DJ or something. But then we would use those as our powwow days to strategize about what we were going to do next. So I was the hook singer for Fonte's group called Gimme, which would later become Little Brother. And I was doing Hear Me at the same time while also working on Mama's Gun, all at
Wow.
Central. And all those people would support me who came to my open mic nights, who were fans of theirs, and we kind of cross-pollinated. I would venture to say, you know, there was the Soulquarians, and then I had my Soulquarians over there in North Carolina that I was churning my own thing with. And then simultaneously, you know, in New York, I was also coming of age with Tiambe Lockhart and, you know, Robert Glasper and Bilal Oliver. And, you know, I got lots of crazy stories about crazy nights in New York that we all spent while we were all still in college,
Wow.
idolizing people who we work with now.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
great. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about collaborations then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you've somewhat alluded to kind of where I'm going with this, but you have um, a nice array of collaborators that you worked with, all amazing in their own right. But I wanted to find out, well, you kind of let me know,
Uh-huh.
but I do want to go in a little bit more detail with your collaboration and your chemistry with a Fonte and even like a
Mm-hmm.
Raheem.
Yes.
You know, I would love to hear about that particular thing. And then I guess related to uh, relationships between artists, if you will, because I've never been in that situation, so I always like to ask.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny thing. By the time I was an adult living on my own, I've never dibble dabbled in my workspace. I don't mix that. It never ends well,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Fonte is the closest I came to it. And we were in college when we started seeing each other, and we taught each other a lot. We were best friends, and that created a great deal of music. I would even say to this day, even when we were no longer dating and we were married and, you know, relationships of our own and having our own, you know, living our own lives, we have always finished each other's musical sentences.
Nice.
Period. Everyone has somebody, you know, I would say that he is my musical soulmate or was my musical soulmate in that way. You know, I don't feel like, I feel like Chip Shearing was a musical soulmate and he was like a father figure. There's so many various relationships in which, what's the word? Eros, agape, philia, all these, when I say those are the Greek words for love, and there are different types of them that create music. I would say that that same symbiosis existed between Erica and I when I was working with her, because sometimes she would fly me in by myself and I'd be an Electric Lady, you know, all by myself, you know, being asked by her or James Poyser or Amir what it was I heard. But the trust and the love that pours into that comes from a space of pure love first. You know, and of course when you making love, then of course, you know, that helps. I mean, look at Prince. How much love did he make, and how many records of his do we enjoy because of it? But I have all types of relationships. You know, Raheem is like a brother, like a dear friend. Wes Felton, I love making music with him. Bilal, I just did the first, historically first, you know, satellite live session together 2 weeks ago, where I sung some, you know, backs on some things and made some additions to a project he was working on. You know, I got great love for them. And I've also always worked very well with men because I'm a tomboy. It may not look like it, but, you know, I thought I was the Undertaker. I loved to wrestle. You know, I identify with men because my friends joke with me and they say I'm 75% male. So I think that that's where that came from. But I would love to work with more women. I would love to work with more women,
Wow.
especially as a vocal arranger, as a writer, as a composer.
What's touring like for an indie artist? Because I know you've experienced. I want to get into some of the later touring later. Just
Yeah,
FYI, but
it gets fluffier around that.
I want to talk about the nuts and bolts of touring as an indie artist. Some people think it's just putting something out and that it's going to come to you, and they have different ideas about it. But I know you've seen multiple sides of the touring world itself, but I would like to find out from you what it's like when you're touring to support your own music.
I've done all the jobs. I've literally been the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. I've been the CD printer, the graphic arts designer. If you like the cover on the Prelude, I designed the cover. You know, I taught myself graphic arts so that I could assist myself. I bought my own printing machine so I could do that. I figured out how to make T-shirts. I created a pseudo name for a manager that people could call, and she would say, "YahZarah is not available to do this date. You know, your goodwill won't feed her kid." You know, like, you know, she doesn't need, you know, she doesn't need exposure. You know, that I would do that because most people don't, especially as a woman, because I'm very business. And I've learned to be that by having lots of really great mentors. But very few people want to hear no from a woman, unfortunately, especially back then. I think people are more used to women in the seat of advocating and doing their own thing. But back in 2003, 2005, 1999, you needed somebody to be a face for you. And I've had all types of managers. One thing I always did was I matched their work. Because if you're an independent artist, a managerial relationship only works if you are matching someone else's work. And the more famous the manager, the more you're really just, you know, doing the work and living off the association of the manager's name. None of these things are bad. You just have to be a very self-encouraged person to profit from them all. Self-encouragement is real shit. You know, I learned over time that if I was going to survive, that's what was going to happen. In 2003, I put out my first, like, I guess we would consider a large label album. On a label called Three Keys, and that was Black Star, pardon me. And Black Star contained songs from Hear Me. If I'd had my way, we'd have just put out Hear Me repackaged. I had to advocate for myself in a way I never had to for my art. And unfortunately, I lost a lot of battles because I was extremely young. You know what is best for your art. You know how to advocate for it. If you want to be the one who's in control of that all the time, then don't sign to a label. Unless you and that label have an agreement that they just totally believe in your understanding of your art and want to leave you alone to create it. If they don't go there, because you're going to be mad. They're going to tell you who you are. They are because they count beans and they don't want to take chances. And so I always call the Black Star album my corporate record, because I wanted to eat. I put a down payment on a house. I got a car, but I hated singing the songs. I hated singing Wishing. And there's some people who got engaged to Wishing and, fell in love. The closest thing to me on that record is Bury the Bitch. And, the songs from Hear Me that I was able to fight to get on that record. And it was a divine lesson for me, because there were also some ways I felt like I could have arched my back a little bit. Maybe I didn't have to perform with my live band for every single show. But then the mental battle of knowing that you are enough comes in, but that's something only person can learn with time. I was 22 years old. I felt like I needed the band. I felt like I had to have them behind me to be enough. I was also rolling all over the floor and foaming at the mouth as a performer. I was the Millie Jackson and the Millie Jackson and the Tina Marie of that time period as a performer. I would say that what I am now is a more finessed version of all the things I love, and most importantly, myself. But if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have known that I like being in control of my own art.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best advice I can give anybody. Be self-encouraged. Don't be afraid to ask for help from the resources that are present. Don't be afraid to be your own resource. And for sisters who are out there, don't be afraid to call a thing if you are working with pickup bands in various cities. One of the things I really learned is that you can't be mad at the band for not knowing your music, because they're going to cram most of them. If you don't know it yourself, so you can protect the baby. I think of the art as the baby. I got to protect the baby. And sometimes I've worked with pickup bands all over the country, and I've said, and I try to be as respectful as possible, but I always say, do you think that's your best work? Did you really share it? How long did you listen to the music? And then, because the drum is everything for me, I highly suggest that every sister learn how to do a paradiddle, learn how to get behind the drum set, and be able to say to a drummer, this is what I want. Because there's nothing like doing a performance and you have a drummer who's just not listening, either A, because you can't tell them and you can't communicate, or B, because they don't want to know. One of my favorite things to do when I'm dealing with a resistant drummer or a musician of any type, because I literally learn all of the notes in my music down to every nuance. I know the bass line, I know the guitar part, I know the triad that it is, I can sing it to you. That's the only way you can get pissed. It can't get, you don't know your music, you're putting yourself out there. If you got to have live bands behind you. I have now learned how to do both. I can sing with a track and still be YahZarah. I can sing with a band in Paris, which I just did, and it was an amazing experience, and still have a great show, because I can get behind that drum set. I can sing in the ear of a keyboardist with respect, musician to musician. And what I love to do is get behind the drum set and play my beat. And I ask to know every part of the drum set, from the snare to the tom. I know what type of snare. I love a piccolo snare. If you play in my set, then I need a piccolo snare. That's that James Brown whap. That's a tight snare. If you are a musician who wants to be an independent musician and can't travel with your best band all the time, you need to know your music like a musician knows their tool.
Yeah.
Those are my, those are my words of wisdom.
Well, listen, that's real shit. Like you said, I mean, I remember being at an open mic at Apache, and it's so loud, and you're trying to tell somebody how to play something, and it's your original shit. I had to learn a long time. Hey, man, listen. If you're gonna do something original, you need to make sure that it's easy enough for them to understand. To the point where even before I knew chords, I knew the 4 chords that were the progression for the song that I was gonna do, and I could say, "Hey, go from C to this to this and to this," and then that allowed me a starting base to at least put something together. But you're so right. I mean, ooh, that's a
and I
jewel
feel
right
for
there.
the male singers, because they always messing with y'all.
Oh, what?
Forever. Forever. So, and, for women, I recently watched the Betty Davis documentary.
Mm.
And I loved her talking about her experiences with musicians, and then talking about how Ella Fitzgerald and all these really amazing singers would say, yeah, like, a sister will come into a jam session, and because there's this power struggle between the front singer and the rhythm section, not wanting to look like they work for the singer, in groups and in jam settings.
Mm-hmm.
Groups and jam settings. You can either make love or make war at the jam session, you know? So, one of the things a really great, profound jazz artist always said to me is, um, know the key. I sing in 3 keys very well: B flat, G minor, F sharp. B flat, G minor, F sharp. That's it. If I'm gonna sing My Funny Valentine, because some people are starting right there. They're literally starting their musical experience at jam sessions, just cutting their teeth. Learn what key that's in. Just call somebody up and ask what key that's in. Get a real book, which in college we had to do, and my teacher made me learn all the scales. So I'd learn all of the mixolydian, all the different types of scales. I'd have to be able to sing them by heart in order to get out of his class in college. And so, I had a unique opportunity that I can hear when something ain't right. So
Mm-hmm.
those of you who have problems with like hearing, ear training, like you can't hear, work on that. Because there are a lot of great writers and performers who are not virtuosos vocally, but write songs that tear the heart to pieces, that we don't get to enjoy live because they can't communicate. And I want to enjoy them live so that they can communicate that. And lastly, it's never too much money to bring your own engineer.
Mm.
Include it in your cost.
Facts.
Or
Right.
save up for it yourself if you're trying to get through the door.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the wrong engineer will ruin your voice forever.
Yes. Straight to just yeah. Okay, so let's talk Lenny Kravitz because he's one of my biggest
Yeah,
influences. Period.
I
Point
love
blank.
him. Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing. I'm a Lenny Kravitz nut, so I remember seeing some Lenny Kravitz stuff. I'm watching like Lenny Kravitz like documentary footage, and I'm like, hey. And I was like, you know what? I said, that is the perfect. I was just like, this is the perfect fit. Cause I just was like, everything you are like as like this phoenix, like all the energy. Like I just instantly saw it. It was a great fit. But
I
tell
was
me,
home. I was at
yeah.
home. It was like, oh, I've come home now. This is home for me. And not just because of the music. It ain't over till it's over. It got me through my seventh grade breakup to a boy named Philip Spence. So shouts out to Lenny for that song. I tell him that story all the time. It's a compliment to me, but he'd be like, you were in the seventh grade. Um, but as a result of being with him, not only did I inherit the opportunity to finally be able to sing the music that I love without questions. So many questions about a black girl making rock music and rock and roll music, which is all. I was the only girl that dressed up as Tina Turner in the first grade. you know, I had a crush on Rod Stewart for years. Like, if you want my body and you think I'm sexy, got me in so much trouble. Like these are the songs I wanted to sing. Yes. And so meeting Lenny and meeting, a chocolate rocker, and also being in the presence of just a person who's just simply a human being who uh, genuinely wanted us to feel at ease with him. On stage, I knew it was business, but off stage, I was in the presence of a very good friend. And I know you can understand that with Sting, And so it's when you are in the presence of somebody who, yes, you work for, but actually sees you as a peer, it grows you as an artist. So I had 4 years to be able to like just be myself, the stylist, the other musicians I worked with, Gail Ann Dorsey, who played with David Bowie, who was one of my musical idols for years, was beside me to the left every night. you know, and I got to just be in that energy. There were so many musicians. Craig Ross, an impeccable music director. So much so that by the time he was done, we were on autopilot. Lenny, who was just consummate about wanting us to sound as good as he did.
Mm-hmm.
And also allowing us to bring him something he hadn't bargained on. He didn't bargain that, you know, Erica, Jessica, and I were going to want to be like the Igettes for him. We decided we were going to dance. We wanted to set ourselves apart and him apart with that. And it was great for me because I hadn't danced in years, and I loved the opportunity to sing and dance again, and to sing such amazing soulful music that I grew up loving, behind somebody who helped mold me into who I am musically.
Love it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Okay,
I loved it.
so juxtapose that, if you will, with Madonna,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I equally saw you um, via clips of hers, via clips of yours, and I'm like, God, you know, I couldn't. If
Mm-hmm.
there's anyone, you know, especially from my own experience, trying to do what I do as who I am naturally,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I felt like, okay, she out here doing it, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I want you to talk about that experience touring leading into the COVID months, because I know that you were on the front lines of the musical experience, especially with our community and how it's been hit by COVID. Your experience being on tour at that same time is unique, and I would like people to be able to know what that was like.
Definitely. First, let me say thank you. Lenny actually back. Okay.
We back. We're good.
I'm sorry. My phone all of a sudden just decided to go dark. Um, First, let me thank Lenny because Lenny basically called me up one day and says, "Hey, Madonna's been trying to get your number for me for some time. Um, can I give her your number?" First up, that call is crazy, but it was 10 years in the making, because a really great friend of mine, Craig Davis, called me up and gave me some amazing business a billion moons ago for a song I had called Orbit. Craig would eventually go on to be Madonna's trainer. And he would talk about me. He would talk about me. He would talk about me because he would say, you know, you need to be on the road with Madonna. She would love you. You need to be out there with her. And so, God bless him. He kept talking about it and talking about it. And then 10 years later, I was in the south of France with Lenny doing a show. And she was performing there too for Leonardo DiCaprio, for a fundraiser for him. And so she got that chance to actually see me in action with Lenny. And then it was, oh, I got to get her. And so for a while, I don't think Lenny came up off that number. And so eventually he did, and we connected. And, you know, it was a very huge undertaking for her doing a show that was different than any other she had done. So I was meeting a new Madonna than everyone else had met. Uh, it was an experience to say the least. I made a lot of strides for myself while I was presently out there. And I want to encourage people to always take whatever situation that they're presented with and use that as an opportunity to expand themselves. I did, while I was also out there, I ended up getting really, really sick multiple times. I couldn't quite figure out why I'm so sick. The whole production was just getting ill over and over again, and nobody could call it. One day they're calling it strep throat, but I'm not tongue kissing my castmates, so it can't be strep throat for me. Then it's the flu, but I've never had a flu like this. And I would venture to say that it happened more than once. But the worst time for me was late January when I I had, you know, lost my voice. I was having a decent and, you know, extremely violent cough. I went to a show the next morning. I got up to try to use the bathroom. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't move my legs, and I had a show that night. So I called the road manager. I texted him at about 3 a.m. because I figured he wasn't up. And I've never been the type of artist that wants to worry the artist I am working with or for. So I said, please do not tell Madonna. Don't tell anyone. Just please come and help me because I can't get up. I can't breathe. And I'm really sick. I don't know how I'm going to make this show. um, I ended up still having to perform. But, you know, luckily I was in Europe. I wasn't here in the United States. I wasn't a person of color in the United States dealing with COVID. Um, and I don't think had I been here, I would have survived. They gave me the medicine that most people aren't going to get. They gave me medicine to keep me working. You know, the design of tour medicine is to make sure that you can continue to stay up and keep working. So I was able to get the steroids. I took hydrochloroquine with zinc. You know, I don't know if that helped. They didn't know it was COVID. Nobody knew what COVID was. We weren't being tested for COVID. So, you know, none of us knew why we were sick, and we did not know we were sick until 3 days. We didn't know we had been exposed till 3 days after we returned home to our families. So, you know, I always say that I feel very grateful that my family didn't get it from me, that, you know, by the time I had gotten home, I clearly was, you know, no longer in the throes of it. But I did lose 18 pounds as a result. Um, my lung capacity has changed. My stamina has changed. But one of the things that it blessed me with was the opportunity to have to discover that I and my gift were enough. Because I couldn't go shimmying all over the stage. I couldn't roll. I couldn't do all of the acrobatic tricks I would do as a performer. And I say that because while I was out there, I always say if you're a performer in your own right and you're a support singer, make sure you do a few shows out there for yourself so you don't lose what you are, who you are, and how to present your gift. And so while I was in Europe, it made sense to perform because I hadn't performed in Europe since 2010 as YahZarah. So I was like, I got to do this. And I had new music, so it made plenty of sense. And so I ended up working with an amazing music director named Kandid, who's Haitian and Cape Verdean and lived in Paris. And he put me together two very incredible bands, but the one I had in Paris with Gabriel Bridgewater, a number of really incredible artists. One day's rehearsal, we put together something that was bigger than myself with some of this new music. And a dear friend of mine named Michael T. Bergen, who owns a fashion line called Norwegian Rain, as well as Michael T. Bespoke. And he's been featured in Vogue and all over. You may have seen him. Really amazing Ghanaian brother with gray hair and just styling. And so he has these flagships from Japan to Paris to Oslo, Norway. And he told me I could use any of them to perform. And so I was in Paris. And so we finally did something together. And it was church. And I needed it. And I had to perform from a stool because I was so weak. And I didn't know why. I just figured, you know, I called my family because I thought I had lupus or something. I wasn't going to come home after the tour. I was going to go to Africa or stay in Europe and see as many doctors as I could till I figured out what was wrong with me. But this particular night, I got the healing that I needed to kind of keep pushing through the dates, you know, and sharing my music as often as I could reminded me of myself while I was out there. One thing I will say, the one lesson I did learn is that I probably shouldn't have gone back out on the road. I should have finished my background career with Lenny. I should have finished it there because I was already ready. Music ready, images ready. You know, so often we grapple with fear of success, self-doubt, or fear of rejection. And I think many times I've gone through this with multiple records, record ready to go, hot off the press, ready to go. And somebody calls me to go do a gig and I go. And I set myself back in time. I turned down so much work while I was out there with Madonna, and I was very glad to go. But in 20 years of singing for other people, I really didn't have to. And so I want to commission people who have it ready, who have it in the can to trust themselves. More of us lose because of self-doubt and fear than any other reason. The only hurdle you have literally thrown in front of yourself are your own doubts. You know, and when I did this show, it was confirmation for myself that my background career was over. You know, I was in the presence of some of the most amazing artists and performers in Paris. And I started to feel that feeling that I knew that probably Eartha Kitt and Josephine Baker and Miles Davis and all these other people filled. And I was like, I can't come back out here working for anybody else again. I'm grateful for the gifts. I'm glad for the money. Not all money is good money. Sometimes it's just time to do yourself. And I'm very glad to be able to add Madonna to my resume and to my list of experiences, because I've never seen a woman work as hard as she did with no cartilage in her hip or her knee, performing and dancing every single night for 8 months.
Wow.
I don't know how she did it. And I commend any human being that would say the show has to keep going, whether it's my hip or COVID. We gonna rock this till the wheels fall off. You know. But what I also learned is that it's my time.
Yeah.
You know, and you got to know when your time is, just like it's your time, Kameron. You know,
Yes.
There's so many of us that I feel like time is rising to meet, and
Yes.
we don't need any more distractions. We can just lean into ourselves now, because the paradigm has shifted too.
Sure has.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me I always try to make sure I'm being time conscious, because I like to make the wrap up nice and sweet. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it right back over to you. But I want to make sure that we can talk about anything that you have coming up with the last like 4 minutes that we do have. So I want to give the floor back to you to promote anything you've got coming up, and to, make sure you impart the people who've been watching us with some final words of wisdom.
Absolutely. And then I'm mad because I lost my light. So let me get my light together.
Hey.
All right. So September 4th, actually, I'll be releasing my Live from Paris album. My music director at the time was genius enough to introduce me to an incredible engineer. And I plan to shout out everybody. So if you are going to Europe and you're looking for a band, Ken is your guy. I will be releasing the live footage and the recording of this performance September 4th, actually ahead of my record, because I feel like people haven't had an opportunity to hear what I give live. And it'll be a great accoutrement to the ceremony. So I'm calling it Cedar and Sage because, customarily we like that cedar and the sage in order to usher in the good. And the ceremony is the good I have to give. I've been working on this record for the last 7 years. Actually, not the last 9. I started working on this record 9 years ago. The title track for the ceremony is Running. And another song I did with both songs, and a song called Heights that I did with Raymond Angry, who is an incredible producer. I'm sure you know him. It goes without saying. And he believed in me when I hadn't written a song. My baby was, maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years old when I first writing these songs for the ceremony that lifted me out of something very deep, self-doubt, and knowing whether people wanted to hear my voice again. And so Cedar and Sage is my coming out party, and the ceremony is my gift to the world. So I look forward to releasing that soon after Cedar and Sage, which comes out September 4th. And I'm doing it all on Bandcamp for a specific reason. We're giving artists all their money. I invite you all to find me on Spotify and Apple Music and all of that afterwards. But first, I'm going to take it to Bandcamp because I really want to support. I want to support that portal for us because it's supporting us.
For sure.
And that's that. Oh, and how can I forget? Soon I'll be starting filming for the first epic action adventure trilogy starring an all-black cast set in Egypt, and it's about all of the female pharaohs that ruled Egypt. One of the producers is Hill Harper, the other is Diana Ross's daughter, Rhonda Ross, and the director is an amazing artist / writer named Kamiko. And it's really great to be able to finally live out all my dreams out loud. I'll be playing the goddess Sekhmet, and I'll be starring in the film for all 3 films. Nice. Yeah, and I'm also a producer on the film as well. So, I was working so hard along with the director. He was like, I can't keep taking these gifts and not give you something. You're working in a producer's capacity now. And I really am grateful for that. And so please look up Kamiko Tarnez. He's also putting out a single right now himself. He is an artist, but he's also an incredible writer. And he's written this for us. He has raised all the money himself privately into the millions for this film. Multi-million-dollar budget. You know, I get to turn into, you know, a griffin. I get to do fight scenes. I've been training with a martial artist for my fight scenes, and I can't wait till we get into taping after we all figure out what's going on with the rest of the world. And so that's what's going on in my life right now.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate you rocking with me. We always have good conversations, and I look forward to continue having them. But on September 4th, we're gonna be rocking with you. And
Yes.
thanks for rocking with me. I'm gonna grab some clips from this and post it later. But thank you for
Awesome.
blessing me with your presence.
It was my pleasure. And one day we're going to get to do that show together. Frank Sheffield has been trying to get us on
Yeah.
stage forever.
Yeah.
So shouts out to Frank because he's
Yeah.
kept everybody working. You know, he kept me working for 10 years when other people would not book me. You know, he was paying all my bills and I didn't have a record out. I'm sorry, it's
No,
Brooklyn.
it's all good.
Pardon me, I'm in Brooklyn. So shouts out to Frank Sheffield for all that he does to assist all of us artists. And shouts out to you, Kameron. So proud of you and all that you're doing. And this show is amazing. And thank you for having me.
No problem. I'll talk to you soon.
Definitely.
All righty. Bye-bye.